Hello, welcome to the Business Spotlight series. I'm your host, Barrett MacDonald. I'm joined today by Aaron Bethune, founder of We Write Stories. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to kick things off a little bit with who you are and what got you started on your entrepreneurial journey?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Barrett, for having me. Let's see. I have had the fortunate opportunities to live in different parts of the world and different continents, which has given me some different perspectives. My parents are, I would say, entrepreneurial in many ways themselves. And so I was able to, from an early age, get an idea of what it is like to see the world from different perspectives and how people can make that happen. I think a lot of us can get into a situation where we're afraid to take any sort of action or risks, which could be anything from moving from one continent to another or starting your own business. Um, my first my first business was actually in the music industry. I'd always wanted to be a part of music. I've played an instrument or two or a few since I was 7 years old. In fact, 4 years old. And I knew that I wanted to be in some ways connected with music. So after uh, being a performer myself and studying music, I ended up starting a music company, of which I was involved in every aspect of the business. Ultimately, I ended up writing a book on the music industry, specifically the business of music, which is still used in certain music institutions and universities. I recognized the power of music was far beyond just the music industry. And in many ways, what music does is it brings people together. And aligns actually a lot with branding, really, because a great brand will bring, people together under its umbrella, just as music will do. It doesn't require endless hits. It just requires something that stands for something that you are able to connect with, and by that connect with others as well. So I got involved in helping organizations in developing stronger bonds with their audiences through the lens of branding and marketing, always sort of with a music strategy behind it, even if music wasn't really a part of it. Ended up creating the role of music and culture ambassador in the state of Mississippi, working with sports organizations like the FIS World Ski Championships and music's impact on performance and training, working with the Gwich'in First Nations as a music strategy around helping to stop oil leases being sold in the Arch National Wildlife Refuge, which is basically Trump, and got involved with different startups as an advisor. I've been a co-founder of a number of different companies and also not-for-profits, and sat on boards as well. And through all of that, I realized that what I was most passionate about was helping people. If they were, here and wanted to be here, there's a lot of internal changes that has to happen first before any external ones start to show up. And so I realized that what I was really passionate about was helping people. And for me, I thought, well, I feel like I've been coaching people already. So maybe I need to start a coaching company. And some serendipitous events resulted in, instead of being a coaching company, becoming a book company, in which our process is really what sets us apart. In fact, I tell people, what makes us the same as other companies is that we do create books. What makes us unique is our process, and our process is really to help people to pause and reflect, uncover who they are, and learn about themselves. And by learning about themselves, being able to recognize their innate talents and strengths. And then we essentially help them align their intents with their actions moving forward. And in the process, we create books which help others learn from the author's journeys and experiences. And so, yeah, I think that brings me up to we write stories, and the fact that we are a company that helps authors write books without them putting pen to paper, but we do it by helping them understand better who they are and what those skills are to be able to more easily transfer those skills to others through the process.
That's awesome. So you don't do it alone, so you've got a bit of a team with you. When you're onboarding and looking for some staff to work with and around, what are those qualities that you look for, and how do you find yourself fostering a positive work environment?
Oh, good question. So I've been notoriously keen on naming roles in out of the box kind of ways, or at least you know, I struggle sometimes with trying to say, oh, it's this, and then I just go, it doesn't quite resonate. So our roles, within our organization include things like story architect and story explorer and story analyst and, this kind of thing. And they all have, job descriptions of which some of the backgrounds are more traditional, whether that's in journalism and coaching and writing and editing. Um, However, what I'm really keen on is of course, for people to also have an interest in why we're doing what we're doing. So usually the way let me backpedal a little bit here. Um, as much as I love the idea of total sort of freedom of sorts, I do like the franchise model in the sense of having the ability to create a model that can be repeated over and over again, provide the same, level of results.
Hmm.
And so from that standpoint, we have manuals within our organization as to how we do what we do. But at the same time, we're also saying these are the parameters. So when we go to hire
Right.
someone, we know that we're hiring someone who has the skills we're looking for, and we're basically saying these are our parameters. Now do what you do within our parameters as a way to ensure that they know that it's not a matter of learning our process in a way that is a relearning as much as it's aligning their existing skills with the process that we're taking our clients through. So I'm really keen to find people that are understanding that what we're making here is impacting the client's life, not just the fact that we're writing a book. In some ways, you could say we're a personal development company, even though
Okay.
a lot of people would see us as a book company. And so that's a big part of it. So it really comes down to the people. I'm a big believer in the idea that our greatest resource is our time, and that it's not just the time that we're spending, but it's who we're spending it with. And that goes for
Hmm.
both our clients as well as the people that work with us. We want to make sure that we enjoy the time we're spending together. Um, so that's part of the process is, are we on a similar trajectory and, resonate in what we're trying to achieve? Um, I I like to start with the idea that we have an understanding of what people are going to do within the organization, with the understanding that over time we're going to figure out what they really are going to do or they're going to want to do, because I'm also a big believer in the fact that we're not limited to our resumes, but rather that when we get a chance to know someone really well, we see what their skills are, and by doing that, we're able to empower them to dive deeper into those skills, which sometimes can take them in a completely different direction of where they started, which I think benefits both the organization itself. For some reason, I'm thinking of Patagonia. I mean, Patagonia, I think it's fair to say people that work for Patagonia first and foremost want to work for Patagonia. And
Right.
so Patagonia's people are a great representation of that brand. It's not just a 9 to 5 job they show up for. And in turn, that has, I think, propelled Patagonia's brand forward through things like their documentaries and other things that they do that are not really clothing, but represent who they are as a brand and their storytelling. And so, that's what I strive to do as well, is to find people that, are able to take what we're doing and insert themselves into it to take things in a direction that we couldn't have foreseen when we started.
Absolutely. That's fantastic and just awesome. Like you've got such a good grasp on everything. It's envious to, I'm sure, myself and those that are going to be watching. So you talked about time a little bit. So what do you do to balance your personal life and the demands of running a business such as yours?
I used to talk at universities, and there's that thing of that say, if you do what you love, you'll never work another day in your life. And I'd say, or you become a workaholic because you love what
Right.
you do so much, you're just doing it all the time. And I wouldn't present myself as a workaholic by any means, but I'm really fascinated by what I am involved in. Curiosity is at the core of probably everything I do because I'm just curious about people, about how things work, about all sorts of things. And so it's not like I'm trying to get away from my work to get into my personal life, or get away from my personal life to get into my work. I think, that idea of work-life balance is sort of a cliche. Well, it's a thing that is certainly talked about a lot. I would say that for me, part of how I moderate myself is becoming aware of the quality of what I'm doing. So if I'm, seeing a lack in the quality of my work, or better said, that my time is not being as effective as I believe it could be, um, I'll go do something. If it's at a
Right.
time when I could do that with my family, I do it with my family. If it's a time when I can't do it with my family because people at school or whatever it is, then I take myself into nature or go to the steam room or whatever it is, but I'll the gym. I'll go do that, because I recognize that some of my personal best ideas come from being away from my work. Just like if you go on a holiday, but you don't have to go on holiday and go for a walk. Um, so there's that, and the same goes with family time. I mean, if I'm distracted by something that's keeping me within my workspace, because there's that sort of flow of sorts between work and personal life. I also like to look at that and go, okay, well, either A, I need to bring myself back into focus to the fact that I'm, you know, here with my family. Or I have to also acknowledge that I'm going to be able to be more present if I can get that one thing off of my mind.
Right.
So that's part of it. The other thing is that we started this company in 2021, so right during the pandemic. So it was remote on day one. And one of the things that I've always been really keen around the team, that we work with is, some amount of self-initiating, the ability to do work without someone looking over someone else's shoulder. But I will commonly tell the same thing to the people that I work with is like, hey, go do that thing. Or, if you're finding that you're stuck, go do what you feel like doing. I don't really care about how you do what you do, when you do it, how long it took you necessarily. I mean, that's interesting data. But
Right.
what's most impactful for me in my personal life and business life, and what I believe to be those are the people I work with, is that you're able to be focused and enjoying what you're doing at all times. And if you're not, then shift over to something that you're going to find more value in, because then you'll come back to that thing with more sort of vigorous interest and energy. So that's probably, in big part how I find that balance. And I guess the last thing on that is more reiteration, I guess, is that at the end of the day, we know what our timelines, our sort of deadline, lifelines, whatever you want to call them, are with our clients. But there is this, that there is this overlap of scheduled. So I mean, I've met the children of all the people that I work with, even though, like I said, we don't share the same location. Um, there's a very open dialogue that goes on between the whole group around. I'm going to just put it this way: as I said, we're a personal development company at the core, so that means we also have to recognize that we're all developing. So
Right.
that's at the center of it too. So.
That's awesome. That's fascinating. So, what would you say have been your biggest learnings as an employer since you began in business?
Since I began. Well, I think, it kind of goes back to what I've been saying a little bit is you want to work with people that you want to spend time with. You want to work with people that you respect. I mean, respect is also gained. But at the same time, I mean, I've certainly taken to heart with the idea of I want to be the dumbest person in the room. And so I'm always looking for people that can teach me something, because that's part of me showing my respect for them too, is like, I'm
Right.
listening, I want to learn from you. um and then there's also that balance. I mean, it's also about personalities, and I think, of course, you learn some hard lessons too when you take the approach that I do, where there's a lot of rope being given, so to speak, and freedoms.
Hmm.
And there's a fine balance there, of course, with, as you well know, with coaching, is accountability. People
Hmm.
have all the right intentions, but I think at the end of the day too, when you work with remote teams, you have to find new ways to create a team environment that can be felt and held accountable, even if you're not sharing the same space. So I think, those are some things. I think that, you have to also recognize that when you are hiring people like ourselves, we're all on a journey and we're all evolving. And so there's always going to be a investment of time and resources put into try and ensure that those individuals can develop their skills further. And so, and you got to take ownership. I'm a big believer in extreme ownership, which, it's if something's not going according to plan, I look at myself first. And
Right.
that I think also hopefully inspires others to do the same.
I'd say that it does. We reference it with action coaches like living above the point. So you got to take that ownership and accountability for others' actions as well as your own, and make sure that you've assessed like, have I explained it properly? Have I given them the right parameters? Have I before you end up blaming anyone else? So sounds like
Oh yeah.
it's a good lesson that you've learned along the way.
Well, it's funny because I think like a lot of people, when you're younger, you get this sort of pushback from people, and you might start thinking, well, they don't get it, or you're annoyed, or whatever it is. And I've actually come to find those are the greatest inputs because, hey, if someone's going to tell you what you already know, or you say yourself, or you've been suggesting is what is truth, um, you're not really getting insights into what other people that don't see it the same way as you would think. And I know, of course, it's not necessarily fact, but I'm a big believer that any amount of people is a great sample of the population. You don't have to go to some massive study to understand that whatever is being told to you by that individual that may at this moment in time be annoying is actually a good sample of the population that are going to feel the same way. And from that, I've actually ended up even, hiring some people that initially really annoyed me. And I was just like, why is this so annoying? And then I came to realize that, they had some skills that for whatever, without getting into sort of depth around this, I realized that there was something they had that was sort of lacking in my own approach. And so I was like, well, hey, wait a second. I kind of want you to do this for me now.
Right.
Not annoy people, but
Yeah.
but do what I recognized they were very, effective at. And I had to again put the spotlight on myself and think to myself, okay, well, why am I feeling like this? When I realized that it was, my own thing, not them, it really opened my eyes. So again, I'm a big proponent of surrounding yourself with people that don't necessarily share your same thoughts, but yet at the same time have you have to have the common understanding of what you do. I mean, at the end of the day, everything is what it is because we agree to it. That's what it is.
Hmm.
$100 bill is that value because we've agreed to it. It's only a piece of paper. But at the end of the day, that's no different with the company, right? I mean, if
Right.
we agree this is what we do, and that's been a big part of how I've approached business too, is are we all wearing the same lens? Because to me, that's one of the first things is are we all seeing this through the same lens? Because if we are, then okay, we can start to get into some of the weeds of things. But if people are not seeing the same thing, then it's hard to really proceed forward with an organization. So at the end of the day, you have to have the same lens on, but then difference of opinions are really valuable.
Absolutely. If you're surrounded by a bunch of people who are just going to agree with you, there's going to be no growth. We learn way more from failure and stumbles than we do from succeeding the first time,
100%.
which is fascinating. So, when you think back of the people that you've interviewed for stories and the different businesses you've had and the people that you've encountered, what would you say are some of the common misconceptions people don't know when they're going into owning a business and entrepreneurship? And what have you done to kind of combat those? And what advice do you give for people to combat those?
This might not be necessarily what you're asking, but I've had a few people actually even recently express their interest of going from working for the man or woman to working for themselves. And this is just going to be a personal opinion from how I look at things. Um, but it was kind of fascinating to me that they had done the research they'd done was on how to start a business and looking at sort of frameworks that exist that they could kind of apply to their own business, but more along the lines of, oh, I'm going to start an e-commerce business. And I totally get that, at the end of the day, you need to be solving a problem. I mean, if you're not
Right.
solving someone's problem, you're not creating a very necessarily valuable um, organization. no one needs what you're providing, then that's that can be challenging. That being said, if you're also starting an organization that sure, maybe people do need another, t-shirt or bag or whatever it is, but if you're doing it purely from the standpoint of I read about this thing and I'll use some, marketing funnels and I'll, do some digital ads and this kind of thing, you haven't considered first and foremost if that's the thing you want to do.
Right.
And if you're going to be able to stick with it, because consistency is hugely important in business, to like you were talking about before we started this with weathering storms, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you can't weather the storm, then it's just going to take one storm to knock you out. And we all know how many storms will exist in, in a year or anyways, point is that there's aspects of things that will set you up for success, knowing that there's hard times. I mean, that's a given with business, especially as an entrepreneur. If you're going it alone to begin with, especially, I mean, you've really got to believe in what you're doing so that when things show up, you don't question it. I mean, you're passionate. So that's a thing that I notice with some people is they don't go down that path of, am I passionate about this? And in the music industry, it's kind of cliche to say it, but there's no one else like you. I mean, you are
Mhm.
you. There's already a Taylor Swift. So,
Right.
it's not necessarily about copying other people's success literally. I mean, yes, learn from their failures and how that propelled their success. But you also have to, start off with, is this something that I really believe in and I really want to do? Because if you're going to be successful at it, I mean, of course, there's benefits, but there's also huge negatives. If you get really successful doing something you really dislike, which obviously is probably unlikely to happen, but if you did, you might be a little sad to be doing something that didn't really connect with who you are. So that would be one sort of angle on that question. But I think that, the other one, which is kind of a no-brainer, is mentors. I
Mm.
mean, probably the most important thing you can find is a mentor, especially someone who's done what you're trying to do. I think everyone needs to learn from failures, which means you got to have some, but at the same time, you don't need to have unnecessary ones either.
Yeah.
It's better to
Exactly.
have like there's a difference between failing because you just didn't have a clue versus having mentors and building a foundation and then going, yeah, I understand what this means to take a risk, and I'm willing to take the risk with the understanding I could fail to grow. And I think that's a very different place to be than if you are failing before you even begin because you just don't know what you're doing. So find yourself a mentor, and be passionate about what you do so that you can, weather storms and continue forward.
Absolutely. And have a plan. Like know
Have a
where you're
plan. Yeah,
headed
have
so
a
that you
plan.
can so you have
Sorry,
something
have
to
a
fall
plan.
back on. No, that's okay. You were touching all around it, but you just calling that out. Like if it's not written, if it's not actionable, then you don't have anything to fall back on, and fall back to that basis is kind of one of the fun things that we work on. So when you think about all the different businesses you've owned and started, if you had to start all over again, what would you do differently the next time around?
Well, that's funny. I was talking to a guy, I don't know, 3 days ago, hugely successful, businesses all over the world. And one of the things that I really resonated with him, in our conversation was that he said he'd never worked for anybody else in his life, essentially. Um, and he talked about how that had been catalyst on some levels to his success. He would rather pursue his own, journey into business and potentially, feel hungry at the end of the month when he couldn't afford food, than to go get a job that would take him away from pursuing those interests. And I think that, you know, a lot of people can resonate with that. But what really resonated for me is that he said, but in the same breath, because he never had worked with for anybody else previously, he didn't know how to do any of it.
Right.
So, I think whether it's looking back in the music space or any, business that I've been a part of, um, I think there's a lot to be said for internships. There's a lot to be said for, again, going back to mentors, but hands-on experience. I think there's a balance. Like I've got young kids and I've been telling my son lately, you've got this amazing opportunity and window of time to fail over and over and over again at the things that you'd most like to try, because you don't have any responsibilities. And at the end of the day, this is the way you can sort of test those waters so that when you are at a point where you need to start making some, you know, bigger decisions, you've gained experience and insights into it. Like, for example, I do feel, and it's one of those things where people might listen to these kind of comments and go, well, that's great, but we have to pay bills. But, I do feel a bit sorry at times for people that are interested in pursuing their own businesses, yet have sold their time to their job, which allows them very little time to pursue what they'd like to be doing. And I understand the side hustle. But we do have finite time and finite energy. And so, part of me feels that you need to get that experience while at the same time you then need to jump into what you want to do. But to jump into what you want to do, if that's entrepreneurship or starting your own business, still requires that you have some foundation, I think, set in knowledge. And so back to this conversation with this friend, was that I resonated because same thing. I mean, my first business was in the music industry, and it's kind of a secretive business. How do you reach certain artists at certain levels? How do you develop an art? How do you get a record deal? How do you do a lot of these things? And that was something that was not quite, it wasn't like go to school for it exactly. I mean, yeah, they
Right.
give frameworks, but I think especially in that space, I would have benefited from doing internships. But at the same time, it propelled me to become, really good at building relationships and asking nosy questions and getting responses and that kind of thing. So that would be, one answer to your question. I think that another big one that I would do differently. But again, everything in retrospect is sort of funny to say, but I probably would have started my first company with a partner.
Okay.
I think it does a lot from accountability standpoint. I think it does a lot from just, sharing a vision, and now you've got more than one person working on it. I think another one is understanding how to ask for stuff. Like if you don't ask, you don't get. And I think that, I can speak to this from the perspective of, say, artist management or development, in that, for example, um, everyone would benefit from having a manager, because at the end of the day, one of the things the manager does is get their artist paid and get the
Right.
value of their time. And I think that when an individual puts themselves in the perspective of valuing themselves, it can be really difficult, because unless you're a narcissist, at the end of the day, you're not always the greatest to value yourself and what you do.
Right.
And I remember speaking actually to a coach who's, gets paid a lot of money for what they do. And I remember saying, okay, so when you first started, you were charging, you know, very, very small fees. How did you get to the place where you felt comfortable in being able to do the same work, but at the same time charge so much more? Which I will make a, side note to, of course, that when, more funds are provided, you're also able to do deeper work. Um, but the answer was is that for this person, it was the shifting away from themselves. It's not about what I am worth. It's what the impact that I make is worth to the client. And that's something that, is very difficult to do by yourself, because it's where we're at. It's what we do. We have a perception of our personal reality, and everything else is a projection of it. So, unless we change our perspective, we continue to project that. And at the end of the day, that's key to business too, is if you're not asking, if you're not, putting value to what you do, you're not going to get to where you want to be. And those are things that, I think coaches are a key component to helping people with. Um, so that's another part of it, asking, valuing yourself, what you provide, so there's lots more answers I could give you to this very same question, but those are the ones coming up for me right now.
No, that's fantastic, Aaron. Aaron, this has been a tremendous interview. I've learned a lot. I know that those that are going to be watching are going to learn a lot from you. So I thank you for your time today. It's been
Thank you.
amazing. And to those of you watching, I hope to see you on our next episode.